Hi everybody, my name is Caitlin and welcome to my channel where we discuss all things horror and horror related. And today, since we are getting close to the Christmas holiday season, I thought it would be a good opportunity to talk about a Christmas horror film, especially since Christmas horror is one of my all-time favorite subgenres. And I was super excited to see that Shudder, the streaming platform, had released a new Christmas-themed horror film a couple weeks ago titled The Advent Calendar. So, join me and grab a drink, sit back, and we are going to talk about this film. Is The Advent Calendar a film that you should be including in your Christmas horror rotation? Let's talk about it. The Advent Calendar is a French horror film which follows Ava, a former dancer who is now in a wheelchair after being paralyzed in a car accident. As if that wasn't bad enough, she is also stuck in a dead-end job while losing her father to Alzheimer's. On the night of her birthday, her friend Sophie visits her from Germany. Sophie gifts Ava an antique advent calendar. The calendar comes with specific rules. For example, you must eat one candy each day. And on the back of the calendar is a very blunt note which simply reads, "Dump it and I'll kill you." But despite these odd warnings, Ava starts eating the candy. As soon as she does, amazing things begin to happen. For example, on the night of her birthday, she receives a phone call from her now lucid father. A few days later, a guy she finds attractive suddenly becomes romantically interested in her. And the candies even give Ava back some feeling in her legs. As the days go by, things take a dark turn when the calendar, or rather the entity living in the calendar, starts demanding sacrifices. Soon, the people around Ava meet grisly fates. But despite the growing body count around her, Ava continues to eat the candies, motivated by the belief that she'll regain all ability to walk again after making it through all 24 days. So I'm going to start off with talking about what I liked about this film, and one of the things that grabbed me immediately is just the overall aesthetic of it. This is not your typical Christmas horror film in the sense of, having bright lights, Christmas trees, killer dressed up as Santa Claus, running around, decorations. It's actually pretty muted. I don't even think any of the characters really mention that it's the Christmas season. You have a couple characters, like Sophie comes in and mentions that she bought the advent calendar at a Christmas market in Germany, but that's kind of the extent of characters talking about Christmas. If you've ever read any of the old Yuletide tales from Europe, from like 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, they're filled with stories of hauntings and elves and fairies and creatures coming to wreak havoc or grant wishes or take, bad people away. And the Advent calendar had that feel to it, right? Because these old European stories are not really based in Christmas and Christmas traditions as we think of them today, the very modernized version of Christmas, the very commercial idea of Christmas. And so I really liked that the Advent calendar is not focused so much on the Christmas holiday as we think of it. It had a folk horror feel to it, which drew me into the story, and I was really intrigued by it. I was really intrigued by the aesthetic of the Advent calendar. It looked beautiful. It had all these weird Christian symbols on it. And I really liked the way it played with the classic "be careful what you wish for" story. This is a story that we've seen countless times in horror films, that we've seen countless times in fairy tales. But the way that this film sets that up is really intriguing. Again, with the advent calendar and having the little candies inside, and each candy represents a specific thing, a specific wish that our main character has. And it's fun. It starts off very fun to see what the different candies represent, what happens. Not everything is perfect for this character, right? Even when she does get the guy, he acts a little weird and says some weird things to her. So even though she gets what she wants, there's something a bit off about it, and that's intriguing. And it had me waiting to see, like, okay, when is all this gonna fall apart? When is the bad shit gonna start happening? So I was really hooked into the film in the first and second act. And then by the third act, the story started to fall apart for me a little bit. I think the biggest issue with the advent calendar is character development, specifically the character of Ava. For me, Ava was just very one note throughout the entire film. This is a character that has suffered immense loss, immense grief, immense trauma and tragedy, yet the film doesn't explore that as much as I wanted it to, or as much as I feel like it could have. The film drops in the third act that she used to be a dancer, that she was a ballerina that was going to go to New York and to be in all these high-end productions, and then the accident happened and she lost her ability to dance. But the film never explores Ava struggling with that. I don't really think she mentions her career as a dancer until later in the second act, third act. When we're first introduced to Ava, she's swimming. I actually thought that she might be a competitive swimmer, a competitive athlete. Like, there wasn't anything to make me be like, oh, she's a dancer. The film also sets up that she's lonely, that she's someone that craves physical intimacy. However, because of her accident, she is unable to feel anything down below, which means that she cannot feel intimacy, she cannot feel sexual pleasure. And so the film touches on that here and there, but again, it all feels very surface level. Like, the film lets you know that Ava is unable to feel sexual pleasure during an assault scene. There's a whole scene at the beginning when Sophie drags Ava to a bar and she meets up with these guys, and one of them is a super creeper asshole guy. You know, then there's another one that seems nice, and the film has you thinking that maybe the nice guy might be into Ava a little bit. He's very kind to her, make sure that she's accommodated. But then by the end of the scene, he ends up going off with Sophie, and it's the asshole guy that's bringing Ava home. And then he pulls over to the side of the road and tries to assault her. And it's in this scene that you learn that Ava can't feel anything at all. I think she even says a line in the film, something along the lines of like, oh, go ahead and hurt me because I'm not going to be able to feel it anyway. Something, which is, it just felt like there wasn't another way you could explain that. Like, it had to be an assault scene. I understand that the film is using that scene to set up the powers of the advent calendar turning on and then going to attack the guy, and this is what's going to start the killing in the film. But I don't know, it just felt like there could have been another way. I know, I mean, I feel like a more interesting scene might have been the nice guy at the bar is into Ava and he takes her home, or she brings him home, and you know, they start being intimate with each other, and then she has to confess to him that she's actually not able to feel anything. And maybe he gets freaked out, maybe he gets angry at her and leaves. And then we have a scene with her where, in her grief of not being able to have an intimate relationship, and her embarrassment and her anger over the situation, it's these emotions that's going to trigger the advent calendar to go off and start doing Ava's bidding. Just my opinion. Again, I feel like the film could have gone deeper with Ava's character. And the other problem with this is that by the time we get to the third act, it doesn't feel like the stakes are high enough. We don't get a progression of seeing Ava in her grief at all of these losses and then seeing her being elated when the advent calendar starts granting her wishes, right? Because even when the advent calendar starts doing things for her, there's not a big emotion from her. Again, it's just kind of one note. And so by the time we get to the third act and it's discovered that Ava is going to have to make a choice, and that both of these choices are going to have their own consequences, it just doesn't feel like the stakes are high enough, because we don't see her progression, we don't really get deep into her emotions. It just kind of feels like, well, whatever choice she's gonna pick is just gonna be whatever. You know, there just doesn't feel like there's enough stakes to it. And just speaking about the third act and the ending, I will just say another issue that I had with this film is it doesn't feel like our main character learns a lesson in all of this, right? Again, this is one of those stories that's be careful what you wish for. It's very in the vein of fairy tales, of folklore, of these stories where you expect a character to learn something at the end, and we don't really get that. The film ends pretty open-ended, kind of makes you guess, could have gone either way, which personally I wasn't really interested in. I would have liked if the film had made a choice and our character learns a lesson in all of this. Just some other quick notes on why the film didn't work for me overall. I felt like the third act was really, really rushed. There's a lot of information that comes at you about the advent calendar, the history of it, who had it before Ava did, but it all happened so quickly. Like, it's like the writers were like, okay, we're getting to the third act and we still have, you know, X amount of days left, so we gotta make this quick. We gotta have everything happen fast. So you get a lot of information coming at you. Characters come to conclusions where you're kind of like, well, how did you come to that conclusion? How did you get to that answer? You have characters that show up at the beginning of the film and then will come back in at the end, and somehow they are able to solve the riddle of the advent calendar, and it's just kind of like, who are you? Like, last time I saw you was at the start of the film, and now you're coming in and you've somehow figured everything out. So for me, the third act was just really unsatisfying. And then finally, I'll just say, this is a personal thing for me, personal taste, but as far as creature designs go, we see the creature that lives in the advent calendar in a few scenes. I wasn't crazy about his design. Again, for me, speaking personally, I'm not a big creature person in films. I kind of like when they just leave it up to your imagination. The film also doesn't explain really who this entity is or why he has all of this kind of Christian symbolism on him and on the advent calendar. I was hoping it was going to go more into the folk horror side of things, maybe bring in some religious aspects to it, but it didn't. It didn't really explain kind of the entity in the box, which I would have been okay with if they hadn't brought him into the film, right? Because he's there for a few scenes and you see him and then he kind of goes away at the end and never comes back. So it's just like, well, who was that guy? Overall, I found the advent calendar to be an okay film. Again, I was really into it in the first act and the second act, and unfortunately the third act just fell apart for me. It's not a terrible film by any means, and as far as the be careful what you wish for stories go, this is certainly one of the better ones to come out in recent years. If you have Shudder and you're looking for something new to watch, give it a try. I know people that have watched this film and did like it a lot more than I did. If, however, you're looking to watch something in the vein of Black Christmas or Silent Night, Deadly Night, you might want to skip this one. Again, it does not bring in the Christmas holiday in any significant way. It really is just about the advent calendar and what happens when different characters interact with it. All right, so those are my thoughts on the advent calendar. Have you seen this film? And if so, what did you think about it? Let me know in the comments down below. Also, let me know what other Christmas-themed horror movies you are watching this season. Thank you for watching this video, and I will see you next time. Bye!